अच्छा जी, many diseases are occupation related. Occupation may alter the habit pattern of employees, for example, sleep, alcohol consumptions, smoking, etc. Like workers in a particular occupation are exposed to certain types of risk factors. For example, the workers who are working in leather industries, they are more prone to having esophageal cancer. The workers that are working in coal mines are likely to suffer from silicosis. Next, can you Next is social class. Yes, socioeconomic factors are very important. Social class is very important. Some diseases show higher prevalence in upper class. For example, diabetes, coronary heart diseases, and hypertension. And some diseases are more prevalent in lower class, like anemia, malnutrition, etc. Behavior is very important. Behavioral factors, uh, unhealthy habits include smoking, sedentary lifestyle, intake of more fatty things, overeating, drug abuse. These all are the showing the unhealthy behavior lead to certain diseases like coronary heart disease, hypertension, cancer, etc. Increased level of cholesterol, etc. So behavior is very important. Yes, some diseases are stress induced. Uh, a big example is hypertension. Hypertension is a stress induced disease. A migration, yes, due to the migration of the people from one place to other place, there can be a transmission of this disease. There can be a transmission of infectious disease when we go from one place to the other place. Uh, Next step is measurement of disease. In descriptive studies, we will measure the disease with the two types of studies. One is cross-sectional studies and the other is longitudinal studies. Cross-sectional studies are basically the studies. It is based on a single examination of a cross-section of people at one point in time. We also call this study a snapshot study because it's a survey based study, it's a questionnaire based study that in which we just take the sample in a single examination of a cross section of a population at one point in one time. It's just like a survey that if I go to any medical college for the survey of smoking, I go there and I distribute the questionnaire to the students. They fill that questionnaire and I go back to the home. So it's a cross-sectional study. It's just single time study at one point in one time. Okay? These types of studies, the cross-sectional studies, usually give us the prevalence of disease. We can obtain the prevalence. I told you prevalence is the old plus new cases about any disease over a defined period of time. And the cross-sectional studies are more useful for the chronic diseases rather than for the short-term diseases. These are cross-sectional studies are more useful for the long-term diseases. Next is longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies basically, as the name indicates, these studies include long follow-ups. These are the studies going for the years. That's why these are called longitudinal studies. The observations are repeated in the same population over a prolonged period of time by means of follow-up examination. Longitudinal studies are more useful, they are more authentic because they can identify the risk factors of disease that we can't identify in cross-sectional studies. In cross-sectional studies, we can just formulate a hypothesis. we can't analyze that hypothesis. So we can just describe the nature of the disease in cross-sectional studies, but in longitudinal studies, we can identify the risk factors. We can identify all the ecological factors, and we can analyze the hypothesis. So these studies are more useful, but the only disadvantage of these studies is they are time consuming. Step 5 will be comparing after all the steps, after knowing after defining the disease, after identify the population, after describing the disease in terms of time, place, and person, after measurement of disease, we will compare that disease with the known indices. We will compare that disease with the gold standard. Comparisons are made with the known indices to arrive at clues to the disease etiology. And the last step is the formulation of hypothesis. Hypothesis is a statement, it's a supposition arrived at from observation or reflection. It's basically, hypothesis is a reflection of your study. You make a hypothesis that shows what you are going to do, what you want from your study as expected outcome. So it's basically the outcome of your disease. An epidemiological hypothesis should specify the population. Hypothesis should specify the population, uh, specific cause, its expected outcome of disease, dose response relationship, that is the amount of cause needed to lead to the stated incidence of the effect. Okay, and time response relationship, that will be time period between the exposure to the cause and observation of the effect. So these all components are very important while you are making a hypothesis for any study. These are the all steps that were involved in descriptive studies. Now, there are some uses of descriptive epidemiology. Descriptive epidemiology will give us the magnitude of the disease load and types of disease in terms of morbidity and mortality rates and ratio. So we can determine the mortality and morbidity rates and ratio. We can determine the magnitude of disease from the descriptive epidemiology. It provides clue to disease etiology and help in formulation of an etiological hypothesis. Only formulation, not we can't test etiological hypothesis in descriptive studies. We can just formulate the etiological hypothesis. That is the difference between analytical and descriptive epidemiology. In descriptive and epidemiology, we can just describe the nature, we can just describe the course of the disease. We can just, on the basis of that, we can just formulate the etiological hypothesis. But in analytical epidemiology, we can identify the risk factors and we can test the etiological hypothesis. It descriptive in descriptive epidemiology, टाइम पूरा हो गया अभी बस बस ये बिल्कुल एक स्लाइड है दिस इज द लास्ट and from that data we can plan, organize and evaluate the preventive services against the diseases we study. And it can also, this data can also help in research by describing the variations in disease occurrence in terms of time, place and person. Thank you so much. Next time we will discuss analytical epidemiology.